Hey, welcome back to Renegade Riders. Today we are replacing the track on this unit. It's got a bunch of torn lugs on it, so we're going to throw a brand new track on. In the process of that, I realized there's not a lot of information about these chain drives out there, and flipping through the manual, a lot of the specifications are very vague. So I was just going to give a little information about the chain drive on most Arctic Cat snowmobiles, but this will be directly pertaining to 19 to 22, 23 Accender chassis. So all the 800 C-Tech 2 engines. On the specifications on the manual, they're pretty vague about what they're looking for here. Typically, let me back up a wee. Typically what we're looking for here is you need to make sure your adjustment is not all the way maxed out, and that's going to be towards the bottom here. Need to make sure we have a little bit of slack, and that's going to be given to you here in the end of the tensioner. It's spring loaded. The tip of the tensioner is spring loaded, and that's what gives you that little bit of slack on your wear for your chain guide. The other thing to point out is this upper sprocket is some kind of hardened steel along with your chain. Of course, you have your steel, some kind of alloy wear plate for your guide, and then just stamped steel and powder metal components there. This lower gear is some kind of alloy, possibly an aluminum alloy. I'm not really sure. I don't have a way to test it, and there's no specifications for it on any resources I can find. It's some kind of alloy, probably aluminum. Anyway, when you open this case up, this gear is going to look pretty chowdered. You can see all those marks down there. There's quite a bit of galding and marring on the gear. The biggest thing you need to pay attention to on these gears is the flats. Just like any other gear set, if your gear is pointed and it's a knife edge, it's junk and you throw it away. If it still has a little bit of a wear patch on the top, a flat spot on the cog, then that gear is fine. You can go ahead and keep servicing it. When you actually remove, because I do recommend you remove and clean all these parts while you're in here inspecting it, you're just checking for cracked gears, missing cog teeth, anything like that would cause an issue. Just general stuff there. Chain stretch, I wouldn't worry about too much. I've only gotten to a couple of these units where I had a stretch chain, and we'll talk about why here in a minute, because it was completely unrelated to the design of this auto tensioning system as far as the power intended, just from the little 800cc two-stroke that these units come with. But that's basically your overview. You want to make sure that your adjustment's not all the way pegged out. You want to make sure that both of your gear sets still have a flat spot on the gear set. There's no missing or cracked teeth on the cog, and just looking for an overall, making sure nothing's broke. You want to make sure your Teflon buttons are still here, and down here you still have your two speedometer pickup magnets that are inside of this little Teflon button. And all these buttons do is these shafts do move out and in a little bit, and just keeps it from rubbing the case. Steel on aluminum. Where I'm going to change the subject a little bit is if you have power adders on these snowmobiles. What I've seen and what I've noticed specifically with anything that runs this chain drive, from your jack shaft to your drive shaft, is when you add a power adder, and I'm not talking about a cylinder head or a pipe, or I've even seen some big bore kits that really don't make enough power to cause any issues here, specifically superchargers and turbochargers. When you start putting that much strain on this system, what will happen is this tensioner will ratchet up all the way to the end of its travel, because you're now putting so much pressure on this chain that you're taking up all the slack in the system whenever it's at full chooch. and this goes to the end of its adjustment, and it puts so much pressure on this little cast aluminum mounting stud that it fucking breaks off. When that thing breaks off, this all goes in the bottom of the chain case, breaks the chain case, sometimes takes out that bearing on the drive shaft, and typically wrecks both halves of your chain case. What I've seen as acceptable solutions to this problem is, one, go to a non-automatic adjuster. There are a couple companies that make, I think, BD something or another. BD Bikeman? Probably Bikeman, I think. Bikeman makes a kit for this that turns this from an automatic adjusting system. You drill a hole right here, and it just gives you a wear bar and a stud and a little coupling here to hold it all in place. And it's just a manual tensioner. So every year you're going to take this cover off, check your tension, set your tension value to whatever Bikeman specifications with their kit is, and that's it. There's no automatic tensioning. Now, with a system like that, what you're going to run into is now you're going to have to check that every single year or a certain mileage interval, depending on what Bikeman says about their product. And that's just going to be another thing you got to check. The other thing you can do, is the obvious solution, is go to a belt drive system. Belt drive system is going to get rid of all this. It's going to go to a manual tensioning system, and arguably it's a better system because it has less maintenance. You don't have to change oil. You don't have to do inspections. The belt's either good or it's not. So a belt drive would be ideal, but if you are trying to do it on a cheap, I believe Bikeman, don't quote me on that, makes a kit to turn this from an automatic tensioner to a manual tensioner, and that would be my recommendation. I am going to do a video on removing the track, probably just a what's involved as far as disassembly and any tips or tricks and tools needed. With this one, again, if you're going to have a power adder, need to change the tensioner to a manual tensioner and get rid of the auto tensioning, or go to a belt drive system, which is probably what most people would do, is just put a belt drive on it. One thing I will say is the alignment of this chain, when you're looking at it, is kind of wonky. You'll notice it's kind of pitched one way or the other. That is something to keep in mind. That could be an indication of bad bearings. We're going to see on this one if that's the case, or if it's just got a weird pitch. These are pretty reliable systems. I've had these on most of the Arctic Cat sleds that I've owned, and it's a very reliable system. You change the oil once a year, and you're pretty well good to go. I mean, I change oil at the beginning of each season, and I've never had any real trouble with these chain cases. I only use Arctic Cat chain case lube, and I've had no issues. It's really all I got to say about this chain case system. We will do another video on the track removal tips and tricks and what's all involved there. That's all I really got to say. Catch you next time.